Hello, I'm Jeremy and I'm a product specialist at Abstract. In this video, we're going to get started with InstaMAT's scene nodes. Scenes are a great way to combine meshes, materials, and textures together, and in InstaMAT, they unlock many powerful workflows, such as the ability to procedurally construct entire worlds and environments. Now, once a scene has been created, we can then export the scene out to disk, and if the export file format supports it, the textures in the scene will also be embedded into the file. Now, today we're going to get started with scene nodes by creating a very simple scene with 2 meshes and 2 materials. Let's dive in. Okay, so here we are in InstaMAT Studio, and you can see I have a very simple package set up here. And if we go to the assets under meshes, you can see that I've brought in a crate mesh, an empty crate, and also some scattered apples. Now, each mesh has its own material assigned, and what I'd like to do is add these 2 meshes into a scene, assign some textures, and then be able to export this scene out as either an FBX or USD with those textures and materials embedded into the file. So let's go ahead and get started. Now, the first thing I want to do is create a new project, and let's create a new element graph. I'll go ahead and create a project without a template. And so let's call this element graph something like crate scene, something simple like that. Now, to create a scene, what I'm going to do is right click to bring up quick search, and I'll type in scene create. Go ahead and hit enter, and now we have our scene create node. So we've created a scene here in the element graph. You can see that it has 1 node and 0 materials. So 1 node because we have the root node. So now what I want to do is I want to add these meshes into the scene. So I'll first start off with the empty crate. I'm just going to left click and drag and drop the crate into the graph. And so you can see that we can delineate between the 2 different types of data here based on the color of their pins. So we have this kind of brownish color, that's for mesh data, and then we have the green pin here for scene data. And so to add this mesh to the scene, we're going to need another scene node. Now, if you're curious about all the different scene nodes, what you can do is go over to the Mat library panel here in the top left and go down to the scene category. And you can see that we have a whole bunch of nodes here in the library used for working with scenes. And we have some really nice options here, including things like the ability to generate turntables and some nice high quality renders. And we'll take a look at this one in just a second. But the quickest way to be able to bring in different nodes is, of course, using quick search. So let's go ahead and use that now to add these meshes to our scene. So I'm going to left click and drag to bring off a connection from the scene create node, let go, and I'm going to bring in a node called scene mesh set. Go ahead and hit enter here. And so all we need to do now is just connect our FBX file, the empty crate, to the mesh input here, and click on this node to dial in some settings. So first, I'm going to go ahead and use the create node option here to create a node in our scene. And now we need to set a path. And you can think of the path as a way to define where this mesh is in your scene hierarchy, similar to looking at the hierarchy of meshes in an outliner like in Blender or Maya. So in this case, I'm just going to give this a path of crate. So this will put the mesh at the root level and give it the name crate as a submesh. But if I wanted to, I could also nest things inside of other nodes. So for example, if I wanted to create something like desk, and then inside of the desk, I want to make a child of that node. So I can hit the separator button here and I can type in crate. And so that will result in having our crate mesh be a child of the desk in our scene hierarchy. But in this case, I just want the crate to be at the root level, so I'll just type in crate. Now, before we continue on, what I want to do is start to visualize the scene while we create it. And we can do that using that scene render node that I showed you from earlier. So I'm just going to drag a connection off of the output here, type in render. And because quick search is context sensitive, it knows that we're working with scene data, so it's found the scene render node for us. So let's bring that in. We can now see our crate. So I'm going to go ahead and just brighten this up a little bit so we can see it better. But now you can see we have our empty crate here in the scene. So now let's go ahead and add our scattered apples into the scene as well. So we're going to do the same thing. I'm going to go ahead and take the scattered apples mesh, bring it into the canvas here. I'll go ahead and right click this connection and type in mesh set to get the scene mesh set node and bring it in. I'm going to go ahead and choose to create a node, and this path is going to be fruit. So it's also going to be at the root level of the scene, but with the name fruit. And then let's go ahead and just connect our scattered apples to the mesh input. And there you go. We can now see that we have our apples in the crate in our scene. So now that we've added our meshes to the scene, next we're going to apply our textures to the different material sections for our objects. And we're going to do this with two different methods. The first method is we're going to procedurally texture our empty crate here using a layering project. So let me just go ahead and open up this layering project so I can show you how it was made. And so InstaMAT allows you to texture and create 3D assets in many different ways. And one of those ways is by using a very artist-friendly layer-based approach to texturing. And you can see here I've added in some different wood materials. I've also got this really cool looking decal on the side. And I also have some edge wear, and I've added some dirt. And so we're now procedurally texturing this crate using this really nice layer-based approach. And all these materials are available inside of InstaMAT's built-in material library. So if I just go to the Mat Library panel and just go to materials, you can see that we have 1,000 high-quality procedural materials here that we can just easily drag and drop onto our meshes here to texture our projects. So it's a great way to very quickly get some really nice looking textures here for our objects. So I'm going to go ahead and save everything here and just close out of the layering project. And so now let's go ahead and apply that layering project to our crate and assign our textures and materials to its material slot. So to do this, I'm going to make some more room here. I'm going to right click the connection, and I'm going to bring in the material set textures node. You can see we have that one here. So this scene material set textures node is great because what it allows us to do is identify one of the material sections in our scene and then assign texture information to that material slot. So let's go ahead and do this. Now, I already know what the name of my material is for the crate, but if you don't know the name of the material, we can easily find out what it is in InstaMAT. So I'm just going to find my empty crate mesh here and drag off a connection. And I'm going to bring in the get material name node. And so what this does, if I supply it the index, so index 0 is the first material slot for our crate, you can see that it provides the name of that material for us, and it's just crate in this case. Now, what's also really cool if I go ahead and expand the set textures node is I can just connect the output, the name that it's generating here, to the material name input for the node. And this is a great way to procedurally apply the right textures to the first slot of my object. But in this case, I'm just going to go ahead and type in the name manually. So I'll remove this node and I'll type in the material name of crate. So now I need to provide all the material information for the crate material, and we're going to do this in a procedural way by utilizing a layering project in InstaMAT Studio. So let's go ahead and drag our layering project into the canvas, and you can now see that the entire layering project becomes a node. And so now what we need to do is we need to supply all the information that our layering project needs to texture our asset, in this case, the crate. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect the crate here to the mesh input. And now we need to supply all the baked mesh maps for the layering project. This includes things like the curvature, the thickness, and the ambient occlusion maps. So what we can do is use the mesh bake node. So I'm going to right click and type in mesh bake. And you can see here now that we have an entire baking system packed into a single node here in the canvas. So what we can do is we can enable all the different bake outputs that we need. So in this case, I'm going to disable the tangent space map, but let's generate an ambient occlusion map, thickness, position, and curvature. And you can see we can take advantage of the GPU here. And I'm just going to adjust the ray length here for this particular mesh because I know that it needs a slightly smaller percentage just from earlier testing. So I'm going to use 0.5 here for the ray length outward, but this could vary depending on the meshes that you're baking. So now let's go ahead and connect our crate to the source mesh and to the target mesh. And very quickly, you can now see that we've baked our mesh maps. So now I need to connect this data to the layering project. And rather than connecting each of these pins one at a time, what I can do is go up here to the links here in the toolbar, and this is link category mode. Now, as soon as I click this, you can see that it combines all the related output pins here together into one connection. So all I have to do is just drag one connection to connect my bake data to the layering project. And now you can see if I just untick link category mode, you can see that all of our connections have now been automatically connected. So that's a really nice time saver with link category mode. Now, next, what we need to do is connect our material information to the scene material set textures node to provide its texture information for that crate material slot. And again, what we can do is go back into link category mode and just take the material output here and connect it to the material input. And so now we're supplying all of that texture information for that material, and you can see here in our scene render node that the crate is now textured. So let's go ahead and do the same thing for the apples in the crate. So I'm going to right click here, type in set textures, and go ahead and bring that node in. Now in this case, I'm going to need to supply the material name, and it's going to be apples. And so now instead of using a layering project to procedurally texture the asset like we're doing here, instead we're going to use an image. So I'll go to my images here and I have the base color for the apples already in the package for this project. So I'm just going to drag this here into the graph and supply it as the base color. And there you go. You can now see that the apples have been textured. So let's quickly review what we've done so far. We started off by creating a scene, and then we've added our meshes to the scene by using the scene mesh set node, and we've chosen to create nodes for both of these meshes, and we're supplying a path for both of these meshes as well. And that's very important in order to properly bring those meshes into the scene. We're now setting our textures and applying our materials to the scene by using the scene material set textures node. And we're using two different methods to apply textures and materials to the assets in our scene. The first way for the crate is that we're using a layering project to procedurally texture the crate using that layer-based approach that we saw earlier. And in order to use the layering project node here in the canvas, we need to supply a mesh and some baked mesh maps, which we can generate with the mesh bake node. Then we're also supplying textures using static textures here, static images, by dragging in an image here and connecting it to another set textures node. And both of these nodes need to make sure that they correctly identify the material section name here by entering in the name. Now, next up, what we need to do is create a scene output so that InstaMAT knows what information to export when we export our scene out to disk. So to do that, it's really easy. All I have to do is just drag a connection off of the last node in the node chain here, let go to bring up quick search, and choose to expose output as graph output. So if I double click that here, you can now see that we have an output which is going to export our scene data. And before we do that, I'm just going to go ahead and remove the scene render node. It's very useful to be able to visualize the scene while we're working, but in this case, we don't need it to generate any information, so I'm going to go ahead and delete it. So now let's go ahead and export our scene out to disk as an FBX file. So to do that, I'm going to go to the curved arrow up here in the toolbar. This is the export panel. I'll go ahead and click that. And so you'll notice here under the image and data outputs, it now sees our scene output that we just created. So we just need to make sure that this is enabled so that we export that data. And now I can provide an output path, some naming conventions if I need to. But most importantly, now I can set the mesh and image file formats. So if I want to export textures out as PNG, I can do that here. Or if I want to export the mesh out as a different format, you can see that we have a large assortment of export formats, such as USD or GLB or GLTF. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and use FBX. And now to export our scene with our meshes, materials, and all of our textures embedded into the file, all I have to do is now click Export. So just at the end of the video, I very quickly wanted to show you what our scene looks like if we import it into another application. So right now we're in InstaMAT Studio. So I'm just going to drag and drop the FBX file from my second monitor here onto the screen to import it. And so as you can see, we now have both of our meshes. We have our fruit and our crate. You can see how the hierarchy is organized based on the paths that we set up from earlier. And you can see that we have the two different material sections here as well. Thanks for watching this video on getting started with scene nodes. If you'd like to learn more about working with nodes in the canvas, as well as other InstaMAT project types like layering, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Here we have an ever-expanding library of videos covering the ins and outs of InstaMAT. And also, check out our community forum and Discord server, where you can ask questions, share your creations, and engage with other members of the community. Well, that's it for now. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. If you enjoyed this video, drop us a comment below, and don't forget to subscribe. For the latest news about InstaMAT, please visit our website and follow us on Twitter. You can find all the links in the video description below. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next one.